The 1992 presidential debates are now, for most Americans, distant video images which briefly flickered on their television screens. Before and after each of the three debates, however, viewers could find numerous pundits and partisan spin doctors dissecting them in minute detail. Does this rush to judgment adversely affect the political process? Are these various efforts at political pontification even on the mark? You may recall how conservative columnist George Will gushed about the performance of challenger Ronald Reagan against incumbent President Jimmy Carter in the only presidential debate of 1980. Indeed, it was viewed by most as a Reagan victory. What viewers may not have known was that Will had coached Reagan before the Cleveland debate. Can voters cut through this endless analysis and make serious decisions on candidates? Yes, but it is not always an easy process. This program will evaluate various instant analyses of the 1992 presidential debates, examining the process by which political reporters and pundits judge debate performances.
I think it's fitting that we're on the campus of a university tonight. These young people, when they get out of this wonderful university, will have difficulty finding a job. We've got to clean this mess up, leave this country in good shape, and pass on the American dream to them. We've got to collect the taxes to do it. If there's a fairer way, I'm all ears. But, see, let me make it very clear. If people don't have the stomach to fix these problems, I think it's a good time to face it in November. If they do, then they will have heard the harsh reality of what we have to do. I'm not playing Lawrence Welk music tonight.
Ross Perot was viewed as the clear winner of the first presidential debate by most political pundits. His down-home style and appearance of straight talk was judged to be a hit. Perot often made hard-hitting statements without being specific on solutions. First, you will see sound bites of Perot from the St. Louis debate, followed by a representative sampling of media responses.
Show them by Christmas the first cut at these plans. By the time Congress comes into session, to go to work, have those plans ready to go in front of Congress, then get off to a flying start in '93 to execute these plans. Now, there are people in this room and people on this stage who've been in meetings when I would sit there and say, is this one we're going to talk about or do something about? Well, obviously my orientation is let's go do it. Now, put together your plans by Christmas, be ready to go when Congress goes, nail these things. Small business, you've got to have capital, you've got to have credit, and many of them need mentors or coaches. And we can create more jobs there in a hurry than any other place. In the final analysis, I'm doing this for your children. So when you look at them tonight, there's another group that I feel very close to. And these are the men and women who fought on the battlefield. The children, the families, the ones who died, the people who left parts of their bodies over there. I'd never ask you to do anything for me, but I owe you this, and I'm doing it for you. And I can't tell you what it means to me at these rallies when I see you, and you come up, and the look in your eyes, and I know how you feel, and you know how I feel. And then I think of the older people who are retired. They grew up in the Depression. They fought and won World War II. We owe you a debt we can never repay you, and the greatest repayment I can ever give is to recreate the American dream for your children and grandchildren. I'll give it everything I have if you want me to do it.
If you go to USA Today, a paper that can be bought throughout the United States, they chose the headline, jab, comma, no knockouts, debate poll gives Perot most points. And in the New York Times this morning, Maureen Dowd reports that in the applause meter poll that Mr. Perot got 14 applauses in a debate that was supposed to have no applause, and Mr. Clinton had 10 rounds of applause and George Bush had 9. This is the source for this is ABC News, and you can see according to their polling information, and there's usually 5% error in these polls, Bill Clinton won 28%, Ross Perot 24%, and George Bush 18%. Newsweek poll, which was taken again last night by phone, and the Newsweek magazine was held up for the presses until this poll was completed, as was Time magazine's. They did not take a poll, we understand, at least the information wasn't available. If they did have some last-minute commentary by Michael Kramer and others in their magazine. this being a holiday, magazines won't get to the newsstands until Tuesday. The debate winner, according to the Newsweek poll, let's go back to that Newsweek poll if we could, looking at the numbers. If we could go back to the poll we just had on the screen, there we go. It's 43% for Ross Perot, Bill Clinton 31%, and George Bush 19%. The only thing that's the same from the last poll that we showed is that George Bush's numbers hover around 18-19%. And let's look at the CBS poll, if we could, please. Ross Perot 33%, Bill Clinton 30%, and George Bush 16%.
Governor Bill Clinton was said to be too programmed, and President George Bush too passive in their respective initial debate performances. These general comments, as viewed in the long run, appear to have been generally accurate. Clinton and Bush are shown here in clips which back up assertions voiced by many political reporters and editorial writers.
What I'm going to do is say to Jim Baker when this campaign is over, all right, let's sit down now. You do in domestic affairs what you've done in foreign affairs. Be the kind of the economic coordinator of all the domestic side of the house, and that includes all the economic side, all the training side, and bring this program together. We're going to have a new Congress, and we're going to say to them, you've listened to the voters the way we have. Nobody wants gridlock anymore, and so let's get the program through. And I believe it'll work, because as Ross said, we got the plans. The plans are all over Washington, and I've put ours together in something called the Agenda for American Renewal, and it makes sense. It's sensible. It creates jobs. It gets to the base of the kind of jobs we need, and so I'll just be asking for support to get that put into effect.
First of all, the world is still a dangerous and uncertain place. We need a new military and a new national security policy equal to the challenges of the post-Cold War era. A smaller permanent military force, but one that is more mobile, well-trained with high-technology equipment. We need to continue the negotiations to reduce the nuclear arsenals in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and the United States. We need to stop this proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Second, we have to face that in this world, economic security is a whole lot of national security. Our dollar's at an all-time low against some foreign currencies. We're weak in the world. We must rebuild America's strength at home. And finally, we ought to be promoting the democratic impulses around the world. Democracies are our partners. They don't go to war with each other. They're reliable friends in the future. National security, economic strength, democracy.
The second debate, featuring a talk show style format with an audience of uncommitted voters, was negotiated by the Clinton campaign. He was skilled in this process, as he had used the town meeting format on many occasions during the Democratic primaries. In presidential debates, it is more how you appear than what you say that lingers in the minds of voters. Just ask Richard Nixon about his overall appearance in his initial 1960 debate with John F. Kennedy. Watch the confidence by which Clinton conducts himself in the following clips during the Richmond, Virginia debate, then see how pundits viewed his performance.
Since I suggested this format, I hope it's been good for all of you. I really tried to be faithful to your request that we answer the questions specifically and pointedly. I thought I owed that to you, and I respect you for being here and for the impact you've had on making this a more positive experience. These problems are not easy. They're not going to be solved overnight. But I want you to think about just 2 or 3 things. First of all, the people of my state have let me be their governor for 12 years because I made commitments to 2 things: more jobs and better schools. Our schools are now better. Our children get off to a better start from preschool programs and smaller classes in the early grades, and we have one of the most aggressive adult education programs in the country. We talked about that. This year, my state ranks 1st in the country in job growth, 4th in manufacturing job growth, 4th in income growth, 4th in the decline of poverty. I'm proud of that. It happened because I could work with people, Republicans and Democrats. That's why we've had 24 retired generals and admirals, hundreds of business people, many of them Republican, support this campaign. You have to decide whether you want to change or not. We do not need 4 more years of an economic theory that doesn't work. We've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. It's time to put the American people first, to invest and grow this economy. I'm the only person here who's ever balanced the government budget. And I've presented 12 of them and cut spending repeatedly. But you cannot just get there by balancing the budget. We've got to grow the economy by putting people first, real people like you. I got into this race because I did not want my child to grow up to be part of the first generation of Americans to do worse than her parents. We're better than that. We can do better than that. I want to make America as great as it can be, and I ask for your help in doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Clinton.
Yeah, now we see why Bill Clinton suggested this format. It was obviously user-friendly for Clinton. I thought the audience's questions, I noticed that there was not one question relative to Vietnam or draft dodging or any of that sort of stuff that I think the president wanted to talk about. And this was really the Bill Clinton show.
Bill Schneider.
Well, I think we know exactly what each candidate will answer to any question. George Bush will say, I'm already doing it. We have a program in place. I don't think many people believe that. Ross Perot says, I can fix it somehow by a mysterious process of building a consensus. Bill Clinton says, I have a plan. And by God, he's going to give you 3 and 4 and 5 points of plans and programs and schemes and proposals. I don't think any of them had much new to say, but that means that nothing here changed the dynamics of this campaign. And that hurt President Bush because he had to change the dynamics of the campaign. I don't think it happened.
I'm not sure how the audience sitting at home will judge it. It seemed to me that Mr. Clinton was infinitely more comfortable in this format than the president.
Dick Threlka, let's talk about that. President Bush got high marks in the first joint appearance for at least in the beginning, looking and sounding presidential. And certainly there'll be those who said he did so in this format. On the other hand, Governor Clinton said that this format was his idea. From what you saw and heard, did he accomplish one of his goals of looking and sounding presidential in what he considers to be a very comfortable format for him?
Yeah, I think so. And what Susan was saying, you know, no knockdowns, Dan, but they were playing by Marquis of Queensberry rules. Boy, were they polite. And what the problems for Mr. Bush were advantages for Clinton. He took a pass, essentially, very little talk about character, a lot of talk about the economy, which is Clinton's strength. This was his format, as you say. This is what he has been practicing since the New Hampshire primary, interactive, talking with voters. This was Bill Clinton being his most presidential. He passed up a chance to attack the president on Iraqgate. The worst thing he said was a reference to read my lips. He got his economic proposals across. He's playing to tie. He's ahead in the polls. And if there's one downside, it's when Bill Clinton thinks he's being presidential, he can get awfully passive. And there were a couple of moments I thought he was going to fade into the woodwork.
They had a very different mission tonight from the first debate. In the first debate, they wanted Bill Clinton to look presidential. Tonight, they wanted voters to feel comfortable with him. That's why you saw Bill Clinton loosen up. He smiled a lot. He walked down to the audience. He looked at the audience members. He looked at the cameras. The Clinton campaign made a conscious decision to try to get him to be more himself, so he wouldn't be so programmed. They want people to be comfortable with him, and to a certain extent, I think they accomplished that tonight.
Well, now you have been with Clinton since the early days in New Hampshire. I mentioned earlier he loves to be with the crowd. Do you recognize the Clinton we saw tonight as the most natural Clinton?
I think this is the Clinton we see in this format. This is about the 13th town meeting format that he's done since New Hampshire. He's very comfortable in it. He likes it. It's probably where he does his best.
Okay, Chris Bury.
In addition to the political pundits, we have campaign spin doctors who try to get out positive debate messages, no matter how their candidates performed. Here are a few examples following the Richmond debate.
Tori, were you happy with this format for your candidate?
Oh, absolutely. The president has been doing what we call Ask George Bush's for years. He loves answering real questions from real people, and this evening it showed how good it works. He very aggressively, very forcefully laid out the case. He's the only candidate who has the record, the qualifications, and the agenda to be president. It was a terrific night for us.
It was a terrific night for Bill Clinton, and we couldn't be happier. I think no one's done more events like this than Bill Clinton has. He started back in New Hampshire, answering questions from real people, listening to them, addressing their concerns head on, and I think he did that. I think George Bush showed tonight beyond a shadow of a doubt that he just doesn't get it.
Now, shockingly, Sharon, I must tell you that Tori thinks that George Bush won and Dee Dee is convinced that Clinton won. My hunch is you're going to lean toward Perot.
Larry, that's why you are where you are. Absolutely. This was his medium. The campaign came from the grassroots. It was the People's Forum tonight, and Ross Perot was there talking to the American people. He clearly, I thought, dominated the stage and the discussion tonight, and I was very, very pleased with the way it came out.
Bush and Perot were generally not seen as effective as Clinton in the talk show debate. Perot was chastised for saying the same things he had in the first debate. Bush was supposedly passive and occasionally looked at his watch. Again, the pundits concentrate more on what is seen instead of what is said.
President Bush or
I think
Mr.
if Barbara
Perot?
Bush were running this year, she'd be elected. But it's too late. You don't want us to mention appointees, but when you see the quality of people in our administration, see how Colin Powell performed, I say administration, he's in. You weren't impressed with the fact that
excuse me, I'm extremely
impressed. Yeah, but wouldn't that suggest to the American people then, here's a quality person, if he decided that he could automatically get the nomination of either party? Or, huh?
I'm totally impressed with that. I just want to know is when's your guess?
Oh, I see. You mean time?
Yeah.
I don't know. Starting after 4 years. I think you'll see more. I think you'll see more minority candidates and women candidates coming forward. This is supposed to be the women's year of the women in the Senate. Let's see how they do. I hope
Mr. Perot, I don't want to cut you off anymore, but we only have a minute left.
I have a fearless forecast. Unless he just won't do it, Colin Powell will be on somebody's ticket 4 years from now. Right? Right? There, you wanted, that's it, 4 years.
How about a woman?
Now, if he won't be, General Waller would be a concern. Now, you say, why do you keep picking military people? These are people that I just happen to know and have a high regard for. I'm sure there are hundreds of others.
How about Dr. Lou Sullivan?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good man.
Absolutely.
What about a woman?
Well, I told you, my candidate's back there.
Okay, I can think of many.
Many?
Absolutely.
When?
All right, how about Sandra Day O'Connor as an example? Dr. Bernadine Healy.
Good.
National Institute of Health. All right, I'll yield the floor. Name some more.
Thank you.
If I could take issue just a little bit with Jeffrey on this point, that the audience was the dynamic that kept this debate more civilized and reasonable. It seems to me that there were tactical decisions made in both campaigns. In the Bush campaign, it strikes me that they held back on the attack simply because it isn't working. I mean, this debate tonight compared to Quayle, Bush compared to Quayle was like a tea dance at Mrs. Porter's school.
Or a slow dance, as Perot keeps going, yes.
Yeah, I think so. And I think on the other hand, Clinton's people made a tactical decision, which was, as Jeff pointed out, he didn't even, when Carol Simpson gave him an opportunity to go after President Bush on Iraq and Saddam Hussein, he declined.
Ross Perot make any progress in his effort to have voters take him more seriously?
Taking Ross Perot seriously is the biggest problem that campaign has right now, Dan, as you're correct to point out. Ross Perot went into this joint appearance tonight with lower expectations after the James Stockdale fiasco. But I think the voters saw the kind of Ross Perot they're getting used to in this format. He was sort of the folksy everyman who's railing against the problems of Washington. And my sense of it tonight was that we've heard a lot of this before.
Britt, there are people in the country, I think, other than in the press, who like a dogfight. And clearly they had decided there was not going to be a repetition of Vice President Quayle's performance.
Yes, Peter, they did, but not because they thought Quayle had done badly, but because they think it is well for the advertisements, the campaign officials, the vice presidential nominee to throw the hard, bare-knuckle punches, and for the president to remain presidential. Now, there are people who think that he's been acting self-consciously presidential all year, and it hasn't helped him, but nonetheless, that's the approach.
Well, I think the president has to show that he's got a dynamic agenda for the future, and the difficulty is that the last 3.5 years get in the way of that. There really aren't all that many precedents that suggest that a president in his circumstances now, as far behind in the polls as he is, really has any clear way to get out of this pickle. In fact, there's a horrible set of precedents. If you look at the previous incumbent presidents who've been in some trouble in late October, you don't see anybody who's been in as much trouble as he's in now, as far behind in the polls. And I think one of the strains on George Bush is going to be keeping his chin up in the next 2.5 weeks.
Presidential debates are often covered by reporters and pundits as sporting events, with terms such as knockout used with nauseating regularity. The third debate in East Lansing, Michigan proved to be a very entertaining event. There was more real debate clash here than in the other debates. By most accounts, President Bush acquitted himself admirably in this half-single moderator, half-journalist questioning session. Despite his performance, however, some immediately felt the election was over. In this scenario, Bill Clinton would win no matter what Bush did.
Made some news. He had just said Jim Baker was going to be Secretary of State, but in the first debate he said no, now he's going to be responsible for domestic economic policy. Well, I'll tell you, I'll make some news in the third debate. The person responsible for domestic economic policy in my administration will be Bill Clinton. I'm going to make those decisions, and I won't raise taxes on the middle class to pay for my program.
President Bush, you have 1 minute.
That's what worries me, that he's going to be responsible. And he's going to do, and he would do for the United States what he's done to Arkansas. He would do for the United States what he's done to Arkansas. We do not want to be the lowest of the low. We are not a nation in decline. We are a rising nation. Now, my problem is, I heard what he said. He said, I want to take it from the rich, raise $150 billion from the rich. To get $150 billion in new taxes, you got to go down to the guy that's making $36,600. And if you want to pay for the rest of his plan, all the other spending programs, you're going to sock it to the working man. So when you hear tax the rich, Mr. and Mrs. America, watch your wallet. Lock your wallet, because he's coming right after you, just like Jimmy Carter did, and just like you're going to end up with interest rates at 21%, and you're going to have inflation going through the roof. Yes, we're having tough times, but we do not need to go back to the failed policies of the past when you had a Democratic president and a spendthrift Democratic Congress.
Jim. Mr. Perot.
Jim, 1 minute. You permitted Mr. Bush to break the rules, he said, to defend the honor of the country. What about the honor of my state? We rank first in the country in job growth. We got the lowest spending, state and local, in the country, and the second lowest tax burden. And the difference between Arkansas and the United States is that we're going in the right direction, and this country's going in the wrong direction, and I have to defend the honor of my state.
I think overall, Bill Clinton didn't get a pass tonight, but he didn't get hurt badly. And when it's all said and done, one Republican said today, in order for George Bush to win, he had to take a pistol out and shoot Bill Clinton at this stage. He didn't have a pistol. He didn't shoot Bill Clinton. Clinton walks off the stage unscarred pretty much. And so as Ross Perot would say, you can hear out there a giant sucking sound. And what it says is, this election's over in 14 days. That's when it's over.
All right, Chicago Tribune's Elaine Povich. Elaine, what did you think?
Well, I think President Bush didn't do much for the gender gap this evening. You know, that's one of the issues where he's kind of weak, is with women. And when he called Susan Rook of CNN defensive, I think there were a lot of women around the country who cringed. Whatever points he was trying to make against Bill Clinton in terms of his alleged pattern of duplicitousness or anything like that may have been a bit tempered by his attitude towards the question about women in his cabinet. I think Bill Clinton held his own tonight. He didn't really beat up too much on President Bush. In fact, Ross Perot did most of that. I think Bill Clinton owes Perot a big pat on the back for hitting at Bush the way he did.
All right, Bob Maynard of the Oakland Tribune. Bob, your reaction.
Catherine, I don't know what the spin doctors are going to say to you in a few minutes, but let me tell you what I think from what I just saw. I clearly think I saw George Bush just lose the election. The jury was still out as to whether George Bush had a vision for the future of America. Tonight was his very last night, his last opportunity to speak to the American people. He sank instead to an incoherent and stale agenda, the same one we've been hearing now for weeks. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, was cool, calm, and collected. And Ross Perot, I think at the end, was running for financial planner rather than for president. But in any event, he did no good for his cause.
Professor Larry Sabato, what are your thoughts, please?
Catherine, I have to disagree a little bit with my friend Bob. I think that President Bush came alive in this debate, as advertised. The question is it too late? The answer is probably yes. Just as Ken Bodie suggested to us, the fundamentals haven't changed because of the debate. If Bush had started out this way, if he'd been able to maintain this kind of momentum in the three debates, then who knows? But you know, this debate suggested to me the major tactical error of the campaign for the Bush side, and that was when Bush and Baker decided not to take the single moderator format because Bush did quite well at it.
How did you feel that they did this evening?
I thought it was a splendid debate. I thought the president was very strong. He's been perceived in California as being weak and unable to come up with programs to address our problems. But I think tonight he was very, very strong. I couldn't disagree more with David about how Governor Clinton looked tonight. I thought he looked frightened. I thought he was the deer with the headlights in his eyes. And I thought he came off at the end a little patronizing and almost sanctimonious.
The evening, in my view, belonged to President Bush and Ross Perot. I think Bill Clinton had to struggle to stay in the arena with them. It was really two gladiators who were having an amazing duel on banking, on the airline mergers that are coming up. I thought Mr. Perot was very, very interesting on that subject, and I have never seen President Bush so strong. It was an evening for Texas, not Arkansas.
Viewers obviously cannot control the process by which political pundits make post-presidential debate judgments. What they can do, however, is more closely scrutinize the atmosphere in which these opinions are made. The 1992 election was closer than any pollster had anticipated. A wellspring of resentment against Bush and Clinton led to Perot receiving the most votes for an independent candidate since Theodore Roosevelt led the Bull Moose ticket in 1912. In the instances shown, the rush to immediate judgment often takes precedence over thoughtful analysis. This will likely not change in the future, but intensify.